So I want to respond to the criticism that Tolkien did not write enough female characters in Lord of the Rings. So let's start by reminding you that Tolkien was a veteran of the First World War, and one thing that now I've never been to war myself, but I'm guessing that the one thing that does not go through the minds of people in the front lines of battle is, gee, wouldn't it be cool if my wife and children were here? So, in case you missed it, Lord of the Rings is a book about war. You know, of all those swords and giant battles and evil monsters, it's a war story. And just like you don't see very many female characters in movies like Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge, it's just not a common thing. And in fact, the very idea of the female warrior is kind of a modern trope. That's why, I mean, female soldiers were not really a thing historically back in the day when everyone's fighting with swords and shields and heavy armor and all that stuff. And the idea of the Amazon warriors was kind of like a rare legendary thing because it wasn't standard. It wasn't until more modern technology, firearms and things like that you kind of, okay. In the modern battlefield, there's more places where women can actually contribute. And so therefore, and of course, with women's rights movements and all stuff like that, there's a push for women to do more things. And therefore, yeah, so in our modern world, there's female soldiers. But even then, they're not necessarily front lines all the time. But even in fantasy, as a fantasy trope, it was between comic books and video games is what really exploded the idea of, the badass female warrior. And Lord of the Rings was written in the 50s. The 50s by, again, a guy who fought in a real war. And so, yeah, the idea of, hey, wouldn't it be a cool escapist fantasy to imagine, women in the front lines of battle was not really a thing. So, yeah, and that's the basic premise of why you weren't, in the Fellowship, for example. Why were there 9 dudes? Because the Fellowship was effectively a special forces team going on a secret mission to win a war, But now, when you look at the women that Tolkien did write, in Lord of the Rings, there's basically 2 primary main characters, Galadriel and Éowyn. Now, in the movies, there was Arwen, but really in the books, she had much less role, so we'll just stick with the book version right now. And so Galadriel was a fantasy archetype, not just a fantasy archetype, but almost like a religious spiritual archetype. She was this spiritual, this wise sage in the woods there. And as a fantasy novel, she has a huge role as, just from an archetypical point of view. She's the sorceress and a source of wisdom and guidance, and that's part of where Tolkien's writing goes into mythology and even religion here, because his big inspirations were, he was devout Catholic, but he was also a big fan of all the ancient mythologies and religions of Europe. So in pre-Christian paganism, the idea of like the crone or the wise woman was a huge thing in magic and whatnot. And of course, and then in Catholicism, there is the concept of the Virgin Mary as this female energy, this guiding or protecting spirit, and I don't know how many people remember how many people know this, but in the book of Proverbs, wisdom is personified as female. So Galadriel as this kind of spiritual sage is this kind of archetypical role here. But now on a human level, we have Éowyn, who is an incredibly human character. She's stuck in a society that doesn't think she can do anything. She wants to contribute, and it's about how she steps up and saves the day in battle and all that. So, and there you go. We had the warrior woman archetype, who she's presented in a much more I guess you could say historical context. She is an anomaly. It's not normal for women to be soldiers, but that's the whole point of her story, is that because she's a woman, she's not expected to be able to do anything, but she finds a way to do something anyway and ends up saving the day. So, to the original point, why aren't there more women in Lord of the Rings? Well, because it's a war story, and it's not normal for a woman to be in the front lines of battle. That's a modern trope. Lord of the Rings is a classical and historical mythological work. And you don't find a whole lot of female warriors in mythology. When they do, they're usually anomalies, like, say, the Amazon warriors. But the women that Tolkien did write were important and kind of big deals. And I think very well written. So there you go.